Opening sequence. Control tower. The room smelled of stale coffee, metal, and panic. Inside the United States military's primary control tower in Nevada, dozens of screens flickered with warning lights. The night shift had been quiet until 2 minutes ago. Now chaos surged like electricity through the air. A male officer, pale with fear, clutched his headset so tightly his knuckles whitened. Sweat rolled down his temple as he leaned toward the MIC, his voice cracking, but still urgent. Officer, shouting, F-22 is going down. We've lost both engines. No ejection confirmation. The pilot's unresponsive. We need someone, anyone, who can fly blind through the canyon. I repeat, the bird is going down. The chatter in the tower spiked into a frenzied storm. Multiple officers shouted over one another, rattling off altitude numbers, projected crash points, and the growing certainty that the aircraft was going to smash into a populated area. A civilian evacuation alarm began to wail in the distance. And then, a sudden crackle broke through the static-filled radio channel. A woman's voice emerged, cool and steady, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. Female voice, this is call sign Echo. I'll take over from here. The sound was so calm, so absolute, that the control room went instantly silent. Heads turned. Fingers hovered above keyboards. Eyes darted toward each other in disbelief. The officer on the MIC froze, blinking rapidly. Someone muttered under their breath. Junior officer, whispering no. That's impossible. Another voice, trembling, added. Senior technician, she died 5 years ago. Black screen. Title card, she had been officially dead for half a decade. But when the impossible happened, the ghost pilot returned. Flashback 5 years earlier. The room was packed wall to wall with military press, their cameras primed like rifles. The podium at the center gleamed under fluorescent lights. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the air as a senior officer stepped up to the microphone. Before him stood Captain Elena Grace, once one of the Air Force's most decorated fighter pilots. Now she wore no medals. No ribbons. Just a plain, wrinkled dress uniform, hands cuffed in front of her. Her short black hair was neat, but her face was unreadable. No anger. No fear. Just a hollow, unshakable stillness. Senior officer, coldly, Captain Elena Grace, is hereby dishonorably discharged from the United States Air Force. She is presumed killed in action after the canyon crash. This ceremony will mark her final service. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, accusations even. Reporter, Captain Grace. Did you compromise the mission? Another, were you responsible for the crash? Elena didn't answer. Her dark eyes swept across the room until they locked onto one man, a smirking general standing at the back. The man who had orchestrated the false charges against her. The press conference ended. To the world, Elena Grace was gone. The truth, remote desert village. But she wasn't gone. Not completely. In a forgotten stretch of desert halfway across the world, a small, dusty village shimmered under a merciless sun. Here, Elena had carved out a new life, or at least the fragments of one. Her hair was cropped short, ragged at the ends. Thin scars traced her left cheek like faint battle lines. She trained daily with a local resistance group, men and women who had lost families and homes to war. She taught them discipline, precision, survival. When the day's drills ended, she sat by a fire with a tattered flight manual in her lap, studying by flickering light. She had no aircraft, no runway, just an unbroken will. One evening, a local grandmother approached, her face weathered by wind and time. She looked at Elena for a long moment before speaking in a language softened by age. Grandmother, daughter, will you fly again someday? Elena held her gaze, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Elena, only when the world needs a ghost. Present day, the crisis. Back in the control tower, alarms screamed. On the radar, a hijacked F-22 spiraled toward a civilian sector. Its pilot lay unconscious. Autopilot was offline. Panic rippled through the command center. Officers scrambled to relay orders, but the situation was spiraling faster than they could react. Then, a classified signal suddenly appeared on the system, breaching channels that no one had touched in years. The call sign read, Echo. One stunned officer stared at the screen as if it were a ghost. Officer, it's Elena. She's alive. The comm crackled again. Elena, coldly, because you buried me before I was done. She wasn't in the tower. She was flying a Black Ops aircraft nearby, tracking the falling jet. Without hesitation, she initiated a remote link, attempting a maneuver no living pilot had ever dared. She would guide the F-22 through the narrow, deadly canyon, completely blind. The canyon run. The canyon walls loomed like jagged teeth. Wind roared. Elena's hands moved with mechanical precision, but her eyes, sharp and focused, never wavered. In the tower, silence fell. Everyone watched, spellbound, as the two aircraft threaded the canyon, the space between rock and steel measured in mere inches. A junior officer's voice cracked in awe. Junior officer, only one person ever survived that canyon run. Elena Grace. Against all odds, she brought the F-22 out of the canyon and toward the base. The return. The hangar doors slid open as Elena landed the jet. She stepped out, wearing her old flight suit, still torn from the crash 5 years ago. The entire base froze. Officers stepped aside as she walked straight toward the general, who had destroyed her career. Her voice was calm but razor-sharp. Elena, your pilot survived. But your lies didn't. Journalists surged forward, shouting her name, snapping pictures. Elena raised her voice just enough for them to hear. Elena, I didn't fly for glory. I flew for truth. 1 week later. The headlines exploded. General arrested for conspiracy. Ghost pilot returns from the dead. Elena Grace was officially reinstated, and then, on her own terms, she retired. At her retirement ceremony, an officer asked, "Officer, what will you do now, Elena?" She smiled faintly. "Elena, now. I teach girls how to fly through fire." Final scene. Under the wing of a fighter jet, Elena stood surrounded by a group of young girls in pilot gear. They laughed, trained, and listened as she guided them, eyes bright, spirits unshaken. On the screen, a final headline appeared. They declared her dead. They erased her name. But she returned from silence to prove that true strength needs no permission. If you believe quiet strength always returns louder. Let's fly higher.